Hey everyone, it is Wednesday morning, and that means we continue our expert series. And Wednesday, we bring back our longest term guest, and that is Anna Kelly. How you doing, Anna?
I'm great today. How about you, Michael?
I'm doing great. It's April 1st. It is now rent is due. This month that we've all been looking at someday in the future is like, okay, as landlords, is it going to be Armageddon and nobody's going to pay? Is enough people going to pay? Why don't we
It's
talk about?
April Fool's Day. Hopefully, we're not the fools.
Oh, that's right. It is April Fool's Day. I forgot about that. Oh my goodness, all the tricks out there. Oh no. Oh no, please don't play tricks on me, tenants. It would be bad. Why don't
Yeah.
we talk about that? And then we'll get into the meat of the discussion, which is really about how to survive this next 90 days and how to thrive and all the options there. But let's talk about, hey, rent's due. What are you seeing early? Any early signs?
So far, the early signs are actually pretty optimistic, Michael, for me particularly. And, we talk about real estate being regional, but in central Pennsylvania, of my 260-ish, 270-ish units, we have only gotten one tenant that has said so far that they cannot pay, that we're working with on a payment plan. We have a lot of checks coming in, a lot of auto deposits, and so far, we are seeing good signs that people are paying. I actually have 7 new move-ins today, so
Oh,
we're
wow.
scrambling to do that across the owners because some of our PMs are quarantined. So kind of crazy there. And in Atlanta, out of 250 units, we only have 3 tenants so far that have asked for some type of payment plan because they've lost jobs. So it's promising so far and optimistic. We'll know once more rents come in. But I think this month isn't going to be nearly as bad as what we might see, in May or maybe even in June.
That's funny. I'm seeing the same things here on the West Coast or California. We actually, to date, knock on wood, had no tenants reach out, even though we were proactive around the 15th of last month saying, hey, we're here for you. We know this is unprecedented times, all of those things. We've collected about 30% of our rent already. Most of that would be obviously Section 8 money that actually shows up a day early in most cases. So
Right.
that is there. Like you, I'm not really concerned with April. It's May, and then June gets really scary if this is still, we're 90 days into a quarantine when we're a service-based economy. That that might keep me up at night. Not it won't yet, but like you, it's May and June that is a little nerve-wracking. So we
Yeah,
shall see.
yeah. Yeah, and it's tough. It's one of these situations where, we can't bury our head in the sand and not do anything.
Yeah.
Being proactive with your tenants, like you said, is very important. And I was, in every instant, we made sure that they understood that, yes, we still need to pay our bills. We still need them to pay their rent. We gave them options and resources to help them pay the rent, like unemployment and,
Yep.
some local agencies, the checks coming, et cetera. But we also let them know that we care. And if something happens and they do lose a job, we'll work with them. They just need to reach out with us with evidence that they've lost a job and figure it out. So I think being proactive, showing compassion at the same time that you're stern and let them know, we really don't get to just stop paying everything, regardless of what the media says, is important. But I think we also, because I've lived through 2008, I know that if you just wait and you say, well, we'll just see how things go and I'm not going to worry until this happens, you may be caught unprepared for when it happens. So I like to think of, not dwell on, but think of what's the worst case that can happen. Worst case, I can't evict someone for 4 months, which is the law now as of Friday, if you have a federally backed mortgage. And worst case, they can't go back to work and they don't have enough to pay and nobody pays me. So that's worst case. I don't think worst case is going to happen. But if it did, how can I handle resources and navigate resources to my benefit such that I don't lose my property? How can I tap funds? How can I delay payments? What can I do? And really start to think about those things, write them down, and work every day on something to mitigate that so that you know what your options are in advance. So if we do have a really, really bad May or June, we're not just caught on May 3rd going, oh my gosh, what do I do? So I think it's really important to not dwell on the bad, to stay optimistic, but to really work through all the things that could be difficult for us as property owners and to mitigate as much risk as we can.
Yeah, I can say with fairly good confidence that if you're a landlord, these next 90 days, these next 3 months are going to be the most exciting times you will ever experience. And I've been doing this 20 years and I plan to do it another 50. These next 3 months, if you can survive and thrive these next 3 months, you're going to have something that you can hold on, really like Anna talks about. And you know, you'll be the person talking about, hey, I survived 2020, where her and I today talk about surviving 2008.
Yeah.
We will be talking about 2020 for years, if not decades to come. So that's really the topic I want to talk about today. Is I see three outcomes for folks over the next 90 days. The first, and everybody's coming to this as landlords, whether you own one house or you own hundreds, if not thousands. You're going to do one of these three things. You're going to, I guess, put your head in the sand. You're highly leveraged. You have no reserves. You overbought, and you're, you know, one outcome is you're going to lose your property. The next one is going to be, hey, you know, I did it right. I have reserves. I can do this, but it's going to hurt. You know, so we can talk to them about, you know, delaying capital expenses and making phone calls about forbearance and all of those things. And then the third one is, hey, I came into this pretty well capitalized, certainly a black swan event that you didn't expect, but I want to thrive exiting this. So why don't we talk about, I guess, all three, and you can pick whichever one you like to start with.
Sure. Why don't we start with the worst one and get better as we go?
I like it. That's what I was hoping you'd say, but you never know.
So, you know, I think what's going to be really difficult, and I was in this position, quite frankly, in 2008, at the end of 2008, when it really started. People say 2009, but it had already started kind of unfolding before that. You know, I had at that point 2 rental properties, and I had a third one that I decided to, you know, take my 401k and buy another property. And I suddenly found myself with no ability to continue to borrow, because when these kind of things happen, the first thing that happens is lenders get freaked out and they halt loans and they won't give you new money. They won't give you a refi to cash out if you need cash to survive. They won't give you a line of credit. So I found myself in a position, Michael, where we had a lot of debt. We had these properties. We were doing okay with them. But suddenly I was about to lose a job. So many, you know, landlords have jobs and others don't. But all of a sudden, not being able to borrow money, I had zero savings, zero. Like 70% of the American economy today that doesn't have enough for a single paycheck set aside in savings. If you have no money and you have a furnace that goes out, you're in trouble. Well, if you have no money and you're not collecting rents because the government tells people they don't have to pay and the government has quarantined them, you will not have enough to cover your expenses. And so people are going to be in really difficult situations if they don't have savings, they don't have something that they can tap into for emergency funds, and don't already have some credit and credit lines built up to help them weather that storm. And unfortunately, you know, eventually the banks can foreclose. Eventually your utilities can be cut off. You know, this is a unique situation. Supposedly, you can't lose your property in the first 90 days. They can't shut off your utilities for 90 days. But once that happens, you better be ready. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are going to be caught in the situation where they just don't have reserves to get through this kind of period.
Yeah, I think, you know, my experience watching 2008 take out lots of people, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people, and dozens of people in my personal network lost properties. I guess I have a couple of things to say. First off, losing a property hurts your ego a lot more than anything else, right? When you sign a contract, at least in the state of California, you pledge that the property is the collateral, right? They don't put you in jail. They don't come after your wages. They don't do any of these other things. Your credit's hit for, you know, 3 to 10 years or whatever. You know, it's not as horrible as, you know, you think. It happens to lots of people. So don't beat yourself up on it. Learn from this issue. Real estate investing is a tremendous way to build wealth, but you've got to buy right. You've got to be set up right. So learn the lesson. If that happens to you, I apologize. I feel for you. But I don't want you to think it's the death knell. I've known many people. I know people today in 2020 that lost property in '08, and they're much better structured today because they learned that lesson, right? They lost that 1 or that 2 houses, and today they've got 50, 60, 70 units because they learned that painful lesson from '08, and they're just conservative today. So that's the first message. The second thing is this won't be '08 where we had that negative feedback loop. I suspect if you were in that situation, you had that one house, you lost your job, your tenants don't pay, nobody's going to file any foreclosure paperwork for probably 6 to 9 months, which gives you time to potentially figure something else out. I do believe that they will do tremendous workouts, not the forbearance that I hear about today where, hey, you get 3 months off and you owe me all four on the, all four payments on the fourth month. I think that's a stopgap because of some legal ease somewhere that I don't understand. So I believe you're going to have a chance to get that property back. I wouldn't write it off. I wouldn't be an ostrich and stick your head in the ground. I think you've got at least 6 to 9 months to kind of figure out a plan B, get a new job, find a JV partner, something. So this is not '08 where banks couldn't, right? They had to foreclose because it was all chopped up into these 20 different CDOs and they couldn't figure out who owned what to do anything, right? It's a different market. So, but that said, I think 2021 is going to see an uptick in foreclosures, in short sales. I don't think it'll be anything close to what we saw in '08, '09, but I think it's going to happen. I think in some markets, people overpaid. I think there's lots of people doing Airbnb that overpaid. I think there's a lot of people in the Bay Area doing house hacking that overpaid. I think we're going to see high-priced markets get crushed because we were doing abnormal things and people overpaid. And frankly, I could see an exodus from New York, right? I actually own a property in New York where my daughter lives. I bet you New York sees an exodus. It's like, hey, man, I can work from home and I don't have to be here. I'm out. Same with San Francisco. Same with LA. So I think
yeah. And it's already happening in New York because of the rent controls. So not only the rent controls, now people are so sick, I think a lot of people are going to leave. So, to your point about opportunity, there's always opportunity after every crisis. And the key is going to be figuring out, first figure out how to get out of your situation now.
Yep.
But, to your point, having something on your credit is not the end of the world. There's so many ways to find properties and get into them with no money. And it's one of the things that I wish, and when I talk about my story and what I went through in '08, that I wish I had done sooner was figured out that I didn't need to wait for the banks and the credit unions to be able to lend to me, that you can have other resources. You can partner with someone that does have really good credit and do it together and put in the work to get another property, or you can go hard money. There's lots of different ways to recover from a credit hit in the future and still capitalize on finding ways to do deals, seller financing and some other ways. So I think that was a really important, positive note. One thing that I would say to try to not even get yourself in the situation where you end up losing everything. The benefit we have now that we didn't have in 2008 is the government's actually doing something about it. And so, there are SBA loans available right now. I encourage every single person that owns a property to go to SBA.gov and apply for their small business loan. So there's a couple of different kinds of loans that the SBA is putting out right now as in response to this virus. One is a Paycheck Protection Act. So you have to have some type of employees or contractors for that particular program that you can start applying for Friday. But everybody else that has a small business, owns rental property, whatever, can go online and apply for a loan. And it's a very low rate, low doc kind of loan where you don't have to provide a lot of information, and hopefully you can get some funds to help you. So that's a real positive. And the other thing that I'm really excited about, Michael, for anybody, and I'm going to caveat this, that this is not financial advice or telling you that you personally need to do this, but the government for the first time has allowed us to now tap into our 401k by taking either a loan or taking the money out as a withdrawal with no prepayment, no early withdrawal penalty, which is huge. It's 10%. Yep. And you can also take now 100,000 instead of 50. So I, as an investor, have been like, man, I wish I could just get to my 401k and not have to pay that early withdrawal penalty. Well, guess what? Now I can. So I'm excited. But if you have a 401k and you really have no other money, which is exactly where I was in 2008, and I borrowed against my 401k, now you can get up to $100,000. So I would encourage you to at least talk to your financial advisor, talk to an accountant, figure out if that's, your best way of getting cash. And even though you may kind of lock in some losses because the market's down, if you can take that cash and use it to get another cash flowing rental property, or for now to sustain yourself, but also to potentially, get another rental property. those two things are huge sources of capital that we didn't have back in 2008 and 9, that you don't necessarily have to rely on a bank to get you through. So those are two big resources. I also want to point people out to some different online lenders. I'm trying to think of the names of a few, and I can't right this moment, but there's all kinds of lenders that if you go online, they help small businesses out with fast loans. And they might be, 10% interest, but you might be able to get a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 credit line. So it's worth looking at early right now before you start taking a hit so that you can get some cash. And also, as much as I hate credit cards, they're designed for an emergency. So if you have an emergency, apply for some business credit cards now while your credit score is good, and hope for the best. A lot of them will give out $30,000, $40,000 credit lines, and that may be enough to pay your taxes and pay your utilities and not lose your property.
That's great advice. So a lot of that kind of goes to phase 2, right? Which is, hey, I came into this, I'm going to get through it. What are all the things I could tap? The 401k is awesome. And again, I always like to tell our story. I used that in 2008 repeatedly to borrow. You're right. There was a 50K cap. So, man, if it was 100K, man, I'd have bought a lot more property. And then when I left work, I did take the 10% hit. I now wish I would have waited a couple of years, because that would have been nice to get that money back. But yeah, that's a tremendous thing they did. They're pulling out all the stops. And again, what I want people to hear is they're doing this in, 30 days, right? 2008 was, 18 months before a lot of the help came. So the speed of help is focused. It's focused on the right area, right? It's the base of our foundation, the people, not the top 20 financial institutions, which was a lot of 08's bailout. So I'm really, really happy with that. Anything else you want to talk about, kind of step 2, which is how to survive? You've already hit lots of them. Obviously, stop all capital expenditures. Anything that's kind of optional. I wouldn't, save cash. Cash is king. Any other thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Before I was saying, well, if a recession is coming and I can't find a really good property to buy, it's time to start putting some capital improvements in my property, making them nicer, bump rents. Right now, bumping rents is not the name of the game. You need to keep the people that you have. So no more capital expenditures unless it's something that really has to be prepared. The other thing that we're proactively doing, which some people may disagree with, but I feel like it's the right thing for me, is we've gone out and we've actually offered anyone who has leases coming up for renewal to renew at the same rate. We're not doing rent increases. And that way they at least have us an incentive to stay where they are. And it's a way that we can frame it as, we really value you, that we know this is a difficult time and a difficult time to look for housing. We hope you'll stay with us. We're going to not give you a rent increase, just to help with this time. So that has gotten some good response. We've actually stopped some move outs and been able to get people to renew. And we're also giving discounts to our tenants. Some of my properties, we're giving discounts to our tenants if they pay April early, so they had to do it by yesterday, or if they pay May early. We were giving $50 if they pay April early and $100 if they pay April and May early. And we've had several people take advantage of that. Just be happy to get it out of the way. So that's allowed us to take some extra cash flow, to hold and to get some of those rents early, and really to try to prevent move outs. So as much as you want your tenants to pay, you also don't want to have to find, new tenants at this point.
I think that's great advice. I'm going to follow up with my property manager on that. I don't think we've instituted that. I think that's a great idea. Just another reason to talk and communicate. And you're right. It's not about rent increases now. It's about reducing the number of turns, signing a new lease.
Right. And it engenders goodwill, which is really the most important thing right now, Michael, because the media is telling everybody, oh, you can't be evicted and your landlord doesn't have to pay a mortgage. And that's not really true. And so if any opportunity you have to reach out to your tenants and show them that you care and create win-win situations, I think is what's going to help us to do, better than others in weathering the storm. So even coming out and giving a discount, I said, listen, I know it's going to be hard to pay your rent and we value you and we want to be able to keep you long term and we want to create a win-win. So if you can pay it early and prioritize it, we're going to give you 10% off. And it's, my personal properties, I did 10% off. Now, I didn't do it for every single building. I chose the buildings where I knew I had tenants that were most likely impacted based on the jobs that were being closed down in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So and they were thrilled. They're like, wow, this will buy me a couple meals. Thank you so much. So I was much happier to take a 10% hit for a couple of really great tenants than to have them not pay me at all and not be able to, charge late fees or recover that money later.
That's great advice. All right. So let's talk about the step, because again, some people are coming into this and they will absolutely be stronger exiting, right? Because anytime there's chaos, I call it dislocation, right? There's clearly dislocation going on in the market. Um, have you had a chance to kind of look up, or are you so in the throes of managing what you have to say, hey, how can we take advantage of this and be stronger on the exit? Because this will end. Is it 90 days, 180 days? It will end. What have you
Yeah,
thought about that?
Michael, I think people will land in a different place depending on how much cash they really have. I mean, that's the bottom line is, can you afford to be putting out cash for new opportunities? Or do you need to use everything you have right now to kind of fight the fire, and then also be looking at future opportunities where you might be able to get into something without cash? So far, I have been in fight the fire mode, and let's plan for how bad this thing can be, and let's mitigate all of the worst case factors. And to be honest with you, for the past 2 weeks, I'm up till 1 or 2 o'clock every morning,
Wow.
just handling all of the firefighting. Part of the issue is that with lending has dried up significantly. Yep. And, a lot of that, you had mentioned a little bit about 2008, mortgage companies couldn't really modify your mortgage because they were split up in all these little CDOs. That's still the case today. So most loans today, unless it's a small bank that keeps them in-house, and then the banks basically have no right to modify the terms of your loan because they're not the owner anymore. They're just the servicer. So all they can do is put your loan payment on hold. They can't tack it onto the back end and modify it for you like a small bank can. So what that means, as someone who likes to buy multifamily properties with an agency-backed loan, or even the Fannie Mae where you can buy 10 loans, right now lenders cannot sell the loan on the secondary market. So therefore, if they do a loan for you, they're stuck with the loan. Mm-hmm. And most lenders, believe it or not, don't want to be stuck with a loan. They don't want to own them. Mm-hmm. So as much as I'd like to look at properties, and we have a couple that we've looked at that we've backed out of because we know we can't get the loan. Yeah. So if you can't get the mortgage, then you can't capitalize on that property. What it's going to do is cause me to shift to looking more heavily at more small local properties where I can go to my local regional banks and get a loan in-house, or try to contact sellers and say, listen, we are well capitalized. I'd love to buy your property. I'll give you a little bit of cash, but I need you to hold the note until we ride the storm out. And at that point, I'll refinance. So I'm still looking. I'm not closing my eyes to new opportunities, but I'm more thinking about it than I'm actually out there looking to see what's hit the market, until I make sure that we have a really good plan in place for myself and our partners and investors to weather the next couple of months.
Yeah. So I'm lucky coming into this that we are well capitalized, meaning cash in the bank, multiple different banks. So we are actively looking where 90 days ago, I would use my cash strength to buy slightly cheaper, right? I'd say, hey, I can write you a check. No, I don't need a hard money lender. No appraisal conditions, blah, blah, blah. Just here's a check or a wire in reality. Today, I probably won't do a lot of cash offers unless it's 50% off or just something ridiculously cheap. I'm using my cash position for that last point is I want to buy as many units as I can with little down payments, right?
Yes,
right.
For sure.
I'm telling every agent that I can find in Fresno, you go find me an owner-occupied, a land, an owner who owns a bunch of rentals. I'll buy everything they have with owner financing, and I will make sure to pay at least 5 or 6% at closing, so you get paid, right? That's an agent's concerned about. And then, I've done that over the years. And, we've picked up 50, 60, 70 units in kind of 2010 was our big year for this. We're trying to do it again. And, if I can add hundreds of units in the next 12 to 18 months with that strategy, we are. But so what that means for me is I got to tell agents, right? I've got to tell agents, I got to tell wholesalers what I'm looking for. And that's, that's what, for me, that's what April is about is, frankly, recording videos and posts and telling everybody, hey, if you have an owner who wants to seller finance, maybe they're a frustrated landlord who hates all this no eviction noise and all this stuff, and they finally want to be done. Great. Let's turn them into the bank. I'll buy everything they have, and let's go. So that's what I'm trying to do for
Yeah,
the rest of the year.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a great strategy. And once we get through, April and May, I'll be ready to pounce. And if I see anything that comes sooner, I will. But I like I frankly hadn't thought about yet contacting all my agents and saying, hey, if people are distressed, call me if we can work something out. So I need to put some more feelers out too and say, hey, we're still buying.
I think I think that's a good strategy, because again, think about what agents are doing today, right? Most agents are in lockdown. They're looking for something to do, right? So if you can reach out to agents, say, hey, call find out who the owners are and ask them if they're frustrated, and let's see if we can create a deal together. So I think it's a good idea.
Absolutely.
I think you'll find a lot of inventory to at least look at, if not right offers, at least look at. So pretty cool.
Right. Very great idea, because I was just talking to one of my realtors yesterday, and she's so upset. The whole PA, all the realtors are considered non-essential in Pennsylvania. So we are under a true stay-at-home order in my surrounding counties, and agents cannot show houses. So they can't be out at all. So they're like, what do? We need to rebel. We need to figure out how to be able to still, do houses. And they really can't right now. So I think if you can call them and say, hey, I've got an opportunity, call all your clients, call everybody and see if they want to sell, we can create a win-win and pay you a commission without. And in some cases, if you know your market really well, you don't necessarily even have to get into all the units, to make it happen. You can put it under contract and then, say, hey, I've got a longer due diligence period, to get through these things. So great idea.
Yep. You know what? I'm going to create a video right after this one uploads, right, for all my Fresno agents, and say, hey, I got something for you to do for the month of April. So I'm going to do that today.
Love it.
So anything else we want to close this out? Because again, I think there will be lots of people. I only can tell my story. Most of my net worth is attached to being aggressive when everybody is scared.
Yes.
Which means kind of 08 to 12, really. It's going to happen again, right? Banks are scared, buyers scared, sellers scared. It does repeat. Now this one's kind of quick and fast and deep. But any kind of thoughts as we wrap this up to kind of make people feel better about the opportunity ahead?
Sure. I think we have to still sit back and say, listen, we bought real estate as a long-term investment for the most part. Now, people that are out flipping properties, flipping apartments, not very much cash. They're hoping to force rents with, sexy appliances and things like that. They're going to be a little more hurt. But for those of us who are buying rental property for the long term, we estimate that we're going to have, if you're underwriting well, 10% vacancies a year. So for me, I've had 13 years of 2% vacancies. So I've had a lot of extra cash that I thought I wouldn't have in those first few years. And this is going to be 3 to 4 months where we're going to have huge vacancies, potentially, and we're going to have to weather that storm. But the fundamentals of real estate, the fundamentals that people need a place to live, they're still there, and they will be there for a long time. So just look at this as a long game and say, this is a short period where I may have some profitability losses, but I'm going to make up for it. We're going to come out of this thing stronger. And then we're going to seek opportunities for those that can't, unfortunately, navigate out, create some win-win opportunities, and grow our portfolio, as a result. So I think, writing down everything that could happen, the bad stuff, get it out of the way, mitigate those risks, and then ask yourself, how can I grow from this? How can I grow my wealth from this? How can I, when this thing is over, learn from this and become a wiser, stronger, and ultimately, more financially free investor?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I guess one more closing question that came to me as we were wrapping up here is, I'm trying to play it forward, right? I'm always trying to look out years ahead, and maybe it's too early to talk about this, but I don't know how inflation doesn't pick up eventually, right? We're pumping trillions of dollars into this. We'll likely have an infrastructure bill at some point in the next couple of years, which again will help with that inflation. I mean, am I just crazy to see that out 3 to 5 years? Inflation's got to be bigger than it was in the last couple of years, or too many cross currents to know?
I think it's the latter this time. And I understand that the government pumping literally trillions of dollars into the economy, normally would lead to inflation. But typically that happens when you have an otherwise strong economy anyway, and it's taking a short dip and rates are high. Because we're in basically a 0 to 3% interest rate, environment, there's other countries that have been doing this that have never seen inflation. In fact, for reasons they don't know, because it's not exactly history repeating itself, they're seeing more of a risk of depression and rates staying low for a really long time. So just as an example, and again, it's a little bit different, but in '08, I assumed, whoa, they're pumping in all this money, rates are going to go up. I locked in my rates and paid to lock them in an extra 5 years. I paid 0.5% or 1% because I thought rates were going to really go up. And I locked myself in at like 5, and then prime stayed at 3.25, I think, or 3.5 for years. And so rates didn't go up despite all the money being pumped in the economy. So, I think I don't understand all the intricacies of why that happened, but I've just been seeing that other countries are doing it. And because they just keep printing money and they just keep keeping rates low, it's keeping the inflation at bay and working the opposite of what everybody has feared. Okay. So do I know if it's coming? No. But I'm really just kind of saying, let me lock in the low rates that I can. I'm assuming that at least for the next 5 years, rates are still going to be fairly low, because I think it's going to take time to come out of this one. So many more businesses, I think, are going to lose their businesses and have to start over than I think even in '08 or '09. So I anticipate rates staying low for a while. The only exception to that, and kind of a big red herring that I don't understand enough about it to figure out how it's going to happen. But the fact that right now, what we talked about is the secondary market for mortgages. Typically what's happened is when the stock market dips and goes crazy, people rush to mortgage-backed securities because it's viewed as the safe place to put your money. You get a fixed 3.5% or 3.25% or 4%, whatever the rates are. What happened with this black swan event is when the Fed started buying up mortgage-backed securities last week en masse, all of a sudden the value of those mortgage-backed securities dropped. And I think what's going to happen, there's a bunch of servicers who are begging the government for a stopgap, but they're days within a day or two of going into bankruptcy because they hedged, long story, but they hedged mortgage backs by shorting them to offset their interest rate risk. So all these loans have stopped. And now what's happening is, as investors see that the federal government can at any time stop people from paying their mortgage, I don't think it's going to be viewed as that safety of principal investment any longer, where people are willing to get low return rates in order to have safety of principal. So I think what that's going to do is it's going to drive up the cost of mortgage-backed securities. Investors are going to demand a higher interest rate to put their money there, because now it's no longer the risk-free option. And that's going to bode for higher rates for investors that are using any type of loan that's sold and securitized. So, that's the only caveat. Do I think inflation's going to happen? Maybe not so soon, but I do think interest rates on mortgages can go up because of that mortgage-backed security dynamic.
Well, interest rates go up on mortgages. That means the cap rate has to go up, right?
Yes. Which is great for new opportunities, not so great for the value of your own properties.
Exactly. Well, this has been fun. I always enjoy talking to you. I always learn something, which is awesome. So thank you very much for your time, and we will talk next week.
Sounds great, Michael. Y'all have a great week.
You too.